Lots of questions about why people actually traveled there, especially in light of the COVID-19 scare. So let's just get the facts. Did anyone from the Canadian delegation have any possible exposure to someone from the delegation from India in that COVID-19 positive test they had?
No, and it's an indication of how rigorous the British have made the testing. I can tell you myself that I've had 5 tests, and I arrived Monday morning, and so I've already had the stick up my nose 5 times.
Okay, a lot of Canadians, you realize, are saying, why was this in-person meeting essential? I know it's the first time that the G7's met in 2 years, but the government is telling Canadians, don't travel right now. Don't go anywhere. There's a restriction. Clearly, Minister Gould did this meeting virtually. Wasn't that an option for you, so Canadians don't think, wow, what's good for me is clearly not good for Minister Garneau?
So let me explain. First of all, the process is extremely rigorous in terms of keeping us inside a bubble and testing us continuously. And secondly, there are some things that are very difficult to do on Zoom. And when we're talking about diplomacy and getting together with other countries and trying to solve some very challenging problems in the world and having to engage and being persuasive, there's something that is missing when you're on a Zoom call, which is really more like a two-dimensional sort of way of communicating, whilst when you're in the room with people and you see their body language and you have the chance to really discuss it, as in normal face-to-face interactions, it's more like a 3D world, which is really important in diplomacy. And because the process is very rigorous in terms of making sure that we're isolated, I'm in a bubble all the time between the hotel and going to the meeting and then back to the hotel. I don't leave the hotel. That's the way it is.
But I guess my question is the body language of diplomacy more important than the imperative to have a consistent message on safety in a pandemic that shut down our economy and killed more than 22,000 Canadians? I get it. We all want body language. No one doubts that. But what did you get at a G7 meeting that was so important, and that body language becomes the justification for doing something that Canadians are told don't do? It seems to be a thin rationale, sir.
Well, I beg to differ with you, because I've spent the last year doing Zooms and WebExes, and when you are in the same room with your colleagues and having to work out some very challenging issues, such as how do we get COVID vaccines to the rest of the world? How do we deal with China and Russia? Those kinds of issues really do require, because there are people from different countries, some very detailed, extensive, sometimes emotional conversations, and that's something that you can't get on a flat screen.
Okay, so let's find out what actually was accomplished, if the risk was worth the reward. You mentioned vaccines. The big question is, will there be vaccine passports? Did you discuss that, and when will Canadians know about travel? What's the vaccine passport solution that the G7 has?
So the big question about COVID-19 is, how do we get vaccines to the rest of the world? We don't have enough vaccines, and they're not getting to countries that need them. And until all countries get out of the pandemic, we're all going to remain in the pandemic. So we need to find a way to get those vaccines to other countries, and we need to get more vaccines produced. Those are the really important issues, Evan, and those that we discussed today.
So you're saying you didn't discuss anything? There's nothing on vaccine passports?
Vaccine passports were mentioned in passing, but the real issue is producing enough vaccines for the world and distributing them to countries that have not yet received a single vaccine. That's the real big and important issue, and that's the one we've discussed at the G7. Now, on vaccine passports, that's something that Canada is actively engaged in discussing, and it's Minister Haidu who would be responsible for that. And we are talking to other countries, and that's something that could very well happen, but it was not the main item on the G7.
Okay, so vaccine passport's not there, but you said, okay, let's try to get them to low and middle income countries' vaccines. You know, sir, the big issue, India and South Africa and 90 other countries have gone to the World Trade Organization and have asked to temporarily suspend the intellectual property, the patents around vaccines, like happened in the AIDS crisis, in order for these countries to be able to make generics. Canada has not supported that. They've delayed the vote on this. I ask you, there's something that Canada could do. Did you, as the foreign minister, then emerge with this meeting and say, we will support that, we want temporarily to suspend the patents to support these countries to get them a domestic supply of vaccines? Did that happen?
We had a very active discussion, in fact, about that very subject. It was the subject of our conversation today for about an hour. And yes, there are people who are in favor of suspending temporarily for a specific period of time providing a waiver to intellectual property in order to increase the supply of vaccines. But there are also arguments in terms of other ways to do it. The main challenge is producing enough vaccines. And how we go about it, is it by waiving intellectual property rights, which is one option, but also has complications, or are there better ways of doing it? But it is something that we discussed very actively today, again, because we need to increase the supply.
But Minister, you said we needed to get the body language, it was emotional. If there was such a big risk to come, can you tell me straight, what is Canada's position? Clearly it doesn't sound like we're supporting the South Africans, the Indians, and 90 other low and middle income countries that want to suspend the patents. What is Canada's position? What did you pitch today?
Canada's position is that we need to obtain more vaccines. We need to all put more money into the COVAX program. And by the way, Canada is the 4th largest contributor to the COVAX program. And we need to discuss with manufacturers whether they're prepared to make licensing arrangements to allow production, greater production of the vaccine. So that's a very active discussion, and that will be in the communique that is put out now that the G7 is over.
But okay, I mean, a lot of people are going to say Canada should do what we learned in the AIDS crisis and on vaccine equity. There's a lot of, there's got to be some big takeaway here. It doesn't sound like we've moved the ball forward on that. Secretary Blinken of the United States reiterated this weekend again that China is committing a genocide against the Uyghurs. There you are with your G7 colleagues. Will Canada now declare that China's committing a genocide? Will you agree with the United States and the UK on that?
What we said in the communique is that China must allow access to the Xinjiang region, unfettered access, so that a group of impartial experts can go in and verify what the situation is. That's a very strong statement coming from the G7.
But not as strong as the United States. They've already declared a genocide without more access. When will Canada join that?
We have very clearly said from the beginning that we're very gravely preoccupied by the reports that have come out of Xinjiang, and we want unfettered access so that Michelle Bachelet, who is the United Nations High Commissioner for I beg your pardon, Human Rights Commissioner, can go in with a team and look at the situation.
Did you raise the issue of the 2 Michaels who are still there with your G7 colleagues? Did you come out with more pressure on China to release the 2 Michaels who have been more than 2 years in prison?
So what you'll see in the communique is a reaffirmation of the importance of the declaration of arbitrary detention in state-to-state relations, a Canadian initiative, as you know, and just about every one of my colleagues around the table talked about the 2 Michaels and the notion of arbitrary detention, and there was very strong support for this initiative that Canada has taken, and that's ongoing support. There are now 62 countries that have signed up for it, and we will continue to build that momentum.
Finally, Michigan's governor has now today called the Enbridge Line 5, which is critical, a ticking time bomb, and she wants to shut it down next week. Did you raise the issue of this critical pipeline with your United States counterpart and pressure them not to shut that down?
We have been speaking about the importance of Line 5 not only to Canada, and it's critical for Canada, not only because from Alberta and Saskatchewan, but also for Ontario and Quebec, but also for the United States, as you know, for Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, which use some of that product as it comes through the pipeline, and it's been working very successfully for over 60 years, and it's continuously monitored, and it's a safe pipeline. The United States is very much aware of the fact that for us this is a very important pipeline, and we will do everything that needs to be done. And I spoke with Secretary Blinken today to inform him of how important it was for Canada.
But again, I'm just going to quickly go back to this, but we had no new information on whether China's committing a genocide, no new information on the 2 Michaels, no new information about Line 5, no new information about vaccine passports, no new information about getting low and middle income countries vaccines. And you're saying it was still worth it to take this trip for the emotional and body language. I don't want to characterize this as the Marcel Marceau defense here, but if you're not coming back with any solid solutions, how do you tell Canadians it was worth it?
Well, because it was worth it. The G7 is back, if I can put it that way. This is the first time that this multilateral body has gotten together in 2 years, and I would recommend that you read the communique. It covers a great deal of very important measures that we have taken in solidarity with each other to address some of the very big issues of that preoccupy this not only Canada, but the G7, but the whole world. So we think it was a very successful initiative to restart and to hold this meeting.
Minister Garneau, I really appreciate it. I know you're going to be following the protocol and quarantining when you come back. I just want our viewers to know that. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Minister.